Well, Bev, that's the big question. At the moment, the increase each day in new daily COVID cases in Guangzhou is pretty much at a point where Shanghai was just before Shanghai went into a citywide lockdown about half a year ago. And we remember that lockdown continued for a couple of months. It was the most severe lockdown we've ever seen. There were food shortages initially. Parents were separated from COVID-positive infants. It was a real mess, but it did work eventually. They got COVID down to zero temporarily. Now, the level of COVID in Shanghai is very low, but there is still some around. But Guangzhou at the moment is kind of at the point where Shanghai was just before the citywide lockdown. About 3,000 to 4,000 new cases a day. This doesn't sound like much by Australian standards, but if you look at the measures so far, you do have lockdowns in multiple districts, but not all districts. We've been speaking to a couple of people in the city who are not under lockdown. They say that, yes, shops are closed and business is bad, but things are relatively normal. They say they personally haven't seen panic buying or anything like that. But for people who aren't in those lockdown districts, some of them, about half the city, we believe, have to do daily PCR tests. So the level of restrictions are increasing day by day. And the big question everybody is asking in that city, Bev, will they do a Shanghai-style all-city lockdown, or will they try and find a way to avoid it?
Yeah, because of course it is such a massive manufacturing hub. It would have a huge impact on the economy, you would think.
Yeah, that whole Pearl River Delta region too, because with Guangzhou you have other massive metropolises, Shenzhen as well, and they are factory towns, they are export hubs. And so it's not just Guangzhou. If the outbreak were to spread to the other cities in that southern China region, then you have an even wider impact on the economy. Now, one of the things we saw recently with the Communist Party Congress was China's leader Xi Jinping reaffirming a commitment to the COVID-0 policy, but also pledging in very broad terms to make it more efficient and less impactful on China's economy. Now, how efficiently and how smoothly can you really do things if you are forcing people to stay in their apartments day after day, perhaps week after week? We'll see, but certainly, Bev, you can't imagine that it would help China's economy if there does continue to be either a partial or a proper citywide lockdown in Guangzhou.
Yeah. You know, public sentiment is also a factor. We have seen anger, a lot of public anger over some really tragic deaths in lockdown.
Yeah, multiple deaths have now prompted an outcry of anger in different parts of the country, Bev. So last week there was the case of a 14-year-old girl who died after having an incredibly high fever in one of these COVID isolation centres. The fact is she's there supposedly in a hospital treatment facility but didn't get the treatment she needed. Her father has been demanding answers. Then you have there's another case up in the city of Hohhot, once again, where a local family are demanding answers because of a similar complication. Just this afternoon, officials in the second largest city in Xinjiang in the far west said that they will investigate after there was a similar case of a man who was forcibly taken to a quarantine centre and then he died at that centre. You're now seeing so many outbreaks in so many parts across China where local officials are responding by forcing people or close contacts who have the virus into these isolation centres, that inevitably you are going to continue to get deaths, either COVID-related deaths or non-COVID-related deaths. Some of the deaths, Bev, that are causing anger are actually because people have different ailments, but they're being denied hospital treatment or they're being delayed from getting hospital treatment because of COVID measures.
Yeah. You know, when we spoke last, Bill, there were rumours circulating that after Xi's ascension for a third term, that in fact they may be working on a plan to open up. What are your thoughts now with these growing case numbers?
Yeah, so a lot of rumours, and then the officials from the National Health Commission came out to kind of quash those rumours, but that doesn't necessarily mean that there's not some truth to them. A very widely respected journalist for the Wall Street Journal, Keith Jai, he's based outside of China, he wrote a piece just a couple of days ago saying that people familiar with the discussions in Beijing say that the Chinese government is looking for a way out of this COVID zero cycle, but they are going to pursue a very gradual reopening with no set timeline. And one of the things that they may be looking ahead to is whether or not the World Health Organization downgrades the pandemic in terms of severity. And if they did, then that perhaps next year could give the Chinese government a bit of a diplomatic way out to say, look, no longer does the WHO say it's quite as bad, so we can start easing up. It's a really difficult balancing act for the Chinese government, because Xi Jinping has really staked so much on the idea that COVID zero is the correct course, that China's system is exceptional, that only China can do it. So then to kind of backtrack and allow a level of spread which would inevitably lead to many deaths, a bit of a hard thing for the Chinese government to do, but clearly the Chinese government has advantages over the democratic governments when it comes to controlling the political narrative. So watch this space. It certainly won't be anytime soon. Those are the indications coming out of Beijing. But we also have seen, Bev, some local governments are scaling down the amount of testing that they're forcing everybody to do, because the cost of doing all these tests is also starting to mount.
Yeah, extraordinary. Good to talk, Bill. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Beth.